Hello and welcome to Ubuntu AI podcast. I'm Andrea, and together with Maciek, we'll be your hosts. From fun experiments to enterprise projects, AI became the center of attention when it comes to innovation, digital transformation, and optimization.
Open source technologies democratized access to state-of-the-art machine learning tools and opened doors for everyone ready to embark on their AI journey. Ubuntu AI will be your guide in the industry where a community of like-minded people meet to make an impact.
Maciek, this time it's just the two of us, and we're going to talk or approach a subject that we discussed briefly in a previous episode, but I think since that moment a lot of things happened, and maybe to be more precise, we're going to talk about GenAI. Do you feel also this kind of overwhelmed feeling that everyone talks about it nowadays?
Well, yes, but on the other hand, it's quite understandable because what I see right now is that GenAI started actually making its way to real products used by masses of people. It's not like a tech gimmick anymore where people like us get excited, interested, and play with it. But like, I know the phone companies, both Apple and Samsung being like the biggest ones, you have the Galaxy AI with amazing features that everyone is using every day. I mean, I got approached actually by a couple of my family members, how amazing it was. They were on the trip to Arabic speaking country. They don't speak Arabic at all. And they were using the Gen AI embedded in the phone to actually have instant translation while talking to someone and like cross the language barrier that way super easily. They enhanced their photos, like did a lot of stuff, which they like came in and said, now we finally understand what you are doing. So I think that's important that it's getting more helpful to like a typical person instead of just being something in the basement in the lab.
Should I assume that then you agree with Jensen's statement from the GTC of this year in March, where he said that GenAI is going to be a new industry and its own industry?
Yes, I think so. I don't think that this will be like a Gen AI industry, but rather a couple of different industries, like the whole personal assistant thing on your phone, helping you in this kind of cases. There will be one industry of its own, because this personal assistant can also make dedicated learning paths, improve your health, and like work on various different topics. But there will be also the whole industry of enterprise use cases. I myself started using a lot the Copilot on Azure because of all the new technologies coming up every time. It's very hard to keep up, and with the Copilot, it helps you with like hints of what are the new interesting things that you can do, what is the syntax for this new command that got introduced, and that kind of thing. So it's even like completely in an enterprise context, super helpful to use that, right?
At the same time, when you look at it, I think there is a lot of noise out there. And what are your criteria to select what to use or what to look at and not to get lost in all the details and opportunities that one can have?
I mean, I quickly try to assess if whatever is out there and I'm testing is useful for me, and I assess usefulness by the time spent on a certain task. I see that whenever like configuring something super complicated on a public cloud with the Copilot that is there, it reduces the time that I do it, right? So then I would consider it useful and continue using. Like last week I had to deploy OpenShift and configure it, super complicated task with a Copilot. It took me much smaller amount of time, right? The same goes for the assistant that I use for my like own personal learning and notes. I'm using Obsidian, a fairly popular note-taking tool, and I'm using a locally running, well, since recently now, Llama 3 model that is summarizing my notes, finding out connections between them, and helping me to structure the knowledge base that I have. So that's also super helpful because I see that it takes me much shorter amount of time to go through like the interesting research papers from last week than before. So the timing is important, but there are tons of things that I tested that actually didn't improve in terms of the amount of time that I need. And then I'm dropping it as a tool.
What was that? Do you have any project or tool that you tried out and you didn't get along with?
Well, first of all, this whole image generation thing embedded in the popular design tools, or like Canva or Photoshop or that kind of things, that this like the things that it's generating are not that great and that useful, especially for like social media posts or articles and that kind of stuff. It's still not exactly what I want. It's much easier to basically look at the photographies that are already made elsewhere. I was not happy with the image generation quality that is there. If you compare it to like the level that you can get with Midjourney or locally hosted stable diffusion kind of things, you still get it much better. I don't know if this is like the quality of the model that they have behind, or like savings on the quality of the picture or the context size, but still it's not giving me what I would expect it to give. Also, the whole GenAI that is embedded into audio tools that are useful for podcasts and that kind of stuff, it's also still not reducing the time that I would spend on fixing the audio tracks. It's still better to just manually use the tool. So
I would also like to add something here because I have a different opinion in terms of tools, and I think each and every one of us should assess the tools and build their own suite of tools that they like or they use based on their own needs, skills, and so on. What you might be using is not necessarily what would fit me and my skills and needs. And it's exactly like buying shoes. If you buy a brand, I should not use the same brand just because you use it. And it's important for anyone listening to this podcast to kind of do their own assessment before jumping to conclusions. But now let's go back to Gen AI. We walked a bit through maybe some of the use cases and how you can use Gen AI, from summarizing your notes to and finding connections between them to get personal assistance or getting real life translations. What do you think is that still a big blocker for getting even wider Gen AI adoption? What's
but in a lot of places is money, because still most of the people think that they have to pay for like expensive subscriptions for the models, but actually the open source community comes here with a great help. So first of all, like meta open sourcing models of the quality level of Llama 3 is super helpful, because then we as the community have a very good model that we can work upon. But then you can use it to set it up on your local machine, even on a laptop, and have a ready-made set of tools which are comparable or even better to the like huge paid subscriptions. You can take Llama 3 hosted with Olama on your local laptop and put it to VS Code and have your coding assistant. You can hook it up to Obsidian, the same model, still running on your laptop. You can hook it up to a UI like Olama Web UI and have a normal chat type of interaction. You can use LangChain and VectorDB like Milvus to do the whole RAG loop. So you can take a couple of open source tools, put it up on your personal machine and get access. So I think that currently the bigger limiting factor, which is actually real, besides like the subscription cost, because you can clearly avoid it with open source, is the context size. So most of the like quality metrics are heavily impacted by the amount of context that you can put in. Even like with a coding assistant, if you have a huge file with a lot of code, you will not fit in the whole file, the whole project in the context. So you will get lower quality hints through that. And this is only circumvented by more powerful hardware available, right, to run the higher context. So unless you are running on something that has tons of RAM connected to the CPU and GPU, like a Mac, or has a big NVIDIA GPU on your laptop, this will still be the main limiting factor. So lack of acceleration in most people PCs would be the blocker, I think.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong, but I also think there is a bit of maybe concerns, or there are a bit of concerns around how to use it. I often got questions around, is it safe or is it secure to use the open source versions of LLMs, of different LLMs, or what are the main use cases that I can even use ChatGPT? How is my data going to be used if I use any of these kind of solutions? Do you think that's also blocking from a way or another the adoption of the Gen AI, especially in enterprise context?
I think that, like in the enterprise context, still, if you want to go for security and make sure that you don't break any regulatory things, you need to host your own model. Basically, using any third-party service somewhere on the internet is very, I would say, unsure and will make the legal team uneasy because there is no good regulation around it in most of the countries. In European Union, you have something, but still not much. So it's much safer to just host your own model endpoint locally in your network currently because of uncertainty around both regulations and legal aspects of it.
And what would you advise, especially organizations who are looking or consider this?
Advice in what terms? I mean, there is no like one tailor-made advice for every organization, which model to choose and how to build the infra. But I would still look like if you are considerable size, like small, medium enterprise or a big company, look to host your own internal model for basically all your own internal use. That would be the best thing to do right now. And how to do it, there are a couple of things. In most big companies, there are some people interested in AI. It's a popular field. So your IT teams or your DevOps teams will have some enthusiasts, which might be a useful resource in that kind of endeavor, right? You can move them to a team that will be dedicated for it. Otherwise, almost every GSI or consulting company, they are offering services right now that help you do it. Also, in general, setting up your own infrastructure would require GPUs. So all GPU vendors as well as hardware companies offer like bundled services that, hey, if you buy just 5 pieces of hardware from us, we will give you processor that will help you to set it up. So I don't think that this is a problem anyway.
Fair enough. Thank you for that. I also made a bit of test before this podcast, Maciek, and I asked ChatGPT about some of the questions that I should ask about Gen AI. The first one was, what's exciting about Gen AI? And I think we covered that quickly. The second one was, should you build your model, use existing one, or host one? I think you kindly suggested our audience to try to host models and use existing models, but what are the situations when someone should try to train their own model? Or do you think there is such a use case?
I mean, training your own model, mostly there is no use case for you. I mean, if you are not training it right now, being like X or Microsoft or Meta and so on, you probably don't need to because you can take a model from one of those guys and just reuse it. Like training your own LLM from scratch is a very costly endeavor and it's not super useful unless you have a very niche use case that you want to train only on proprietary data. I would imagine that maybe a huge oil and gas company like Schlumberger might train their own model, right? We know that Bloomberg is training their own model for financial. So there are a couple of niche places where you have a very specific knowledge that you want to distill into a model and you want to train. But most people should not, like a normal enterprise that is not very IT focused. They should go with a model that is coming out from someone else. I mean, the foundational one, and you need to decide if you need to fine tune it or anything that you can do around prompt engineering and p-tuning will be enough for you. So that's the only like decision factor that there is.
And when it comes to fine tuning, what are the key considerations to fine tune models?
Fine tuning considerations, I think that it's useful when you have a foundational model, like you take the NVIDIA NeMo for healthcare. This is a generic health related model, right? And if you are making tooling right now to describe MRI scans or X-ray photos, you could fine tune it because you don't need the full corpus of knowledge that is in the NeMo healthcare model. There are a lot of things that are just not useful, like choosing the right therapy and the right drugs for symptoms and that kind of stuff, and make it more focused. So if you need to narrow down what your model is doing, that's where I would look for fine tuning it. And also the second place where I would look for is when you're doing evaluation of your entire pipeline and you see lowering quality of something, and or some of the parameters like response times or something is not satisfactory, and any prompt or RAG or the way how you do embeddings is not helping, then also I will go to fine tuning and try to figure out what I can do there.
Thank you. I'll stay a bit in this still technical space, but I'll move the angle a bit. And I would ask you if you could explain to our audience, how is GenAI actually handling large scale data sets? Because everyone knows you need a lot of data, or there's a lot of data behind GenAI, but I don't think it's clear for anyone how does it actually happen. Would you like to explore this topic a bit, Maciek?
Well, actually, the huge amount of data is only necessary in the training process. So most of the use cases where you would implement your GenAI does not require huge amount of data. It's actually more of like, let's assume that you do the most popular use case, like running your LLM inside a company and you wanted to know everything that you had in your knowledge base. So more important than the size of the data, because even the data in a big enterprise, if you take all of it, it's not huge in terms of size on like flat storage. It's more about creating proper embeddings and trying to clean this data, because companies are gathering data for many years. There are companies that exist over a century and they have tons of like invoices, internal procedures, engineering change notes, or whatever kind of data that is there. So I would rather look in this type of places, not how you can get more data in, but how you can get less data in, because probably half of it is completely useless because it's low quality, or it's not applicable anymore because it's like too old or something like that. And also then I would try to look into higher quality data sets, because this will give you much better results than just trying to, take a big pool, like take all entire SharePoint or entire Google Drive of the company and try to squeeze it into embeddings process and make a huge vector DB with all of it. This will be less useful than actually properly curating what type of data you want to put into the process. The whole different thing is about the training that you have asked, like what Meta or Grok or this type of people are doing. There, obviously, the more data, the better. There are a lot of interesting academic projects where people are gathering not only the internet archives, but also other types of data and trying to publish and open source that, so that you can do, like in an educational institution, train different types of LLMs, maybe dedicated for a certain language or a certain problem space. So there, obviously, getting more and more data is super important.
Thank you. And also, looking from this perspective, Maciek, I think that nowadays everyone talks about GenAI, but how do you distinguish between GenAI and other AI systems? And how do you actually select what's more suitable for you as a company and also as an individual? Because I still believe not everyone should do and use GenAI. It is not the answer to all the use cases that are out there.
Well, of course not. I mean, there are still a lot of use cases where a simple anomaly detection or a simple like linear logistic regression would help. I would actually argue that it's still most of the use cases where you can use an ML system are not Gen AI related. There's tons of work to be done in a lot of simple places with sensors and actuators in factories or in smart cities and this type of places. And also like normal typical image recognition from a camera would be vastly more popular use case than like a complex LLM for medical reasons. Yes, I would completely agree with that. But also I think that the hype around Gen AI and the amount of projects happening and amount of people discussing it might actually lead to a point where we would still have very analog methods to read our electricity meter in front of our house, but it would be much sooner that everyone has an AI assistant dedicated based on Gen AI on their phone. So it's not necessarily the best order of things to do, but I would still predict that this is much more probable.
Now I'll break a bit of a joke, Maciek. So do you think I'll finally stop having issues for forgetting to pay my bills, and the AI assistant is going to remind me how to be an adult?
No, I don't think that's like AI will reach that level anytime soon. It will require like ASI level to make you not forget about things.
One can hope, I guess, right? But what's important, and maybe one of the main differences, is that I think traditional AI systems are really focused on enterprise use cases, where often Gen AI can be just used by individuals in their day-to-day life. And I think as it will mature, as you mentioned, it's going to also have more and more adoption in your day-to-day life, in your activities that maybe you don't enjoy doing that much. However, how do we ensure the reliability of Gen AI results? Because there has been a lot of debate on this topic. You don't want someone who hallucinates, or to rely on someone that hallucinates or something, actually, not even someone.
Well, I mean, the reliability really depends on the how you use it, what are the parameters, what data is it using, right? So you can design a system with very high accuracy and very low level of hallucinations. Obviously, it will not be that fast or be able to do that many things. So I think that this is just a parameter in the system that you need to decide on. This is like just like when you hire someone, let's assume that you want to hire a marketing person in your company to handle all your external communication. You can hire someone the high level of creativity, making a very wide statements, a lot of pictures, and like really on the like high end of the creativity spectrum, versus you can hire an accountant to do just basic table reporting of earnings of the company every month, and that's it, right? So it's sort of your choice on how you would use the tooling and how big level of hallucination slash creativity you want to allow it to have. You can also be very strict and have only 100% accurate answers. Well, we will never get 100%, but basically, like asymptotically go to that number and just limit the amount of things that the model can give you back.
That's one answer, but at the same time, I think that would limit the use cases and the adoption of Gen AI tremendously, no?
Well, yes, that's why I think we need both, or we need both ends of the spectrum. We need systems which are very, very strict and try to achieve as high accuracy as possible, like in, I don't know, an LLM that is supporting legal cases in court or doing any type of things related to law. That's probably where you want to aim for higher accuracy. But if you are making systems that are either working on innovatory fields of knowledge, trying to figure out the way of I don't know, new combination of compounds to build a better material for building houses. You want to allow it more flexibility. If you're making a model that is doing social media marketing for a gaming company, you would put it even further to the high creativity, less accuracy spectrum, right? So it really depends on the use case, and I think we need all of the types.
What about biases?
What about them?
Do you think Gen AI is ready to address biases or not? My opinion is Gen AI is biased, it's true, but if you're being truly honest with ourselves, we as human beings are also biased. And I'm not saying we should not think of how to address that, but it's a very complex problem that we will not solve in the next couple of months. And at the same time, I think that if you block any development because systems are biased, is almost like telling also people to stop interacting because they're biased as well, whether they recognize it or not. And I realize this might be a very controversial statement, but
Might be, but not that much, I would say. I don't think that the model itself, like, I mean, model is just a compression of the data that is coming in there and some mathematical equations. And obviously, the math by itself will not be biased. It's just a like calculus operation. So I would not go there. I think what can be biased is the data sources that you use to either train or fine tune or do your RAG pipeline. And this is fully under human control right now. So obviously if you take someone hugely biased, like, I don't know, the historical bad guys, right? That if you ask them to make a data set, this will make the answers of the model super biased and super like unfair and that kind of stuff. But if you take like a normal sane person who is not super biased by themselves to structure the data sets and structure the RAG pipelines, then you will not get biased answers. So I still think that this depends on humans and their character and their morality, not about the technology being biased. It's like the whole long lasting argument, like, is it a knife that kills people? No, it's the person holding the knife. A knife is just a piece of metal and that's it.
At the same time, if you're being completely honest, Maciek, data sets are biased and there is not much you can do about it. Like if you're training a model on historical data, depending on who you take the data set from, I might be the bad guy or you might be the bad guy. And there is not much you can do unless you put all the available data together. And even like that, there are high chances that you do get some biases, right?
Yes and no. I mean, most of the history obviously is written by the winners, right? So whatever you get in the data set will reflect that kind of thing, but you still can choose your own data sets, right? And you don't have to go for, I don't know, including a Bible together with Mein Kampf and put them on the same level of accuracy, right? That's not really what you want to do for when creating a model.
You are right. But I think it's also important for our listeners to bear that in mind whenever they use GenAI. And I mean, I have the same advice for any other technology. Don't take it and use it without thinking or taking it through your own filter. Because whereas the results might be good, the performance might be good, it still might sometimes be wrong. And that's normal because, again, we as humans are wrong as well. And that's fine. I realized we could talk about GenAI for hours and hours, Maciek. But then I have one last questions for you on and staying around technologies. What are the algorithms or models that GenAI employ? And I'm still reading from ChatGPT's question suggestions. I'm just being almost we could have a podcast with ChatGPT asking us questions. That would be interesting.
Interesting? No, I don't think so. But that's fine. I mean, currently, obviously, the most popular thing that got traction is the whole transformer architecture, right? In terms of like what is actually sitting inside most of the models. But the advanced ones, like if we look at Llama 3 now and the whole technical details, it's much more than just a simple transformer architecture. It's not that anymore, right? There is like a lot of tweaks and a lot of optimizations made both in the how the system is taking in the data, how it was trained. So it's getting into a very complex topic right now. And there is a lot of things that might be easier to explain, not in a podcast form, but maybe on a webinar with graphs and pictures and architectures. Because I don't know how to actually in 2 or 3 minutes speak about the internals of a model like Llama 3 without a picture.
How important is for an end user to understand these details in depth?
For an end user, not at all.
So what's important for them then? They should understand how they can use it. And it's interesting that I've noticed recently there are these workshops on how to use Gen AI and how to use actually different LLMs. What else is important?
Yeah, like all the tricks that you can do in terms of what to write in prompts and what not to write to get better answers. That's super important for like a generic end user. If you are a power user, obviously what would be important is like what is the API of the serving engine. If I'm using Olama, how can I hook it up to other types of apps? How do I set up my own RAG loop and that type of thing? So it really depends on the level of the user. But what's mostly, I would say, important for the like a typical end user would be the accessibility of the solution itself, because we are doing a lot on the technical side and trying to make it better and better in terms of how many teraflops of GPU I can use or what's the accuracy and so on. But there is still a little work done on the user experience of using this. Like if you look through the plethora of companies and the models that were created, like all of them are just the same UI and no hints, no good documentation, no good user workflow. They're all like almost identical because people who are building the new model are basically competing with each other and chasing each other's parameters and not really put a lot of effort into the user experience. I think that's a field where we need to start doing better.
I also think maybe it's more for enterprises, but understanding what kind of data they're going to share with the model and also what's the best case scenario for them is also important. I don't think we should start hosting our own models right away, but rather do a bit of exploration. And it's also important to check it out. Don't take everything for granted and assume it's going to work perfectly, but rather assess as you go and be always mindful on how you could improve it. We talked a bit on how to fine-tune a model or not, when to cost it or not. And these are just some of the examples that we have. Maciek, you know we're getting close to an end, and you know my usual question, sorry. What's your thought for AI of tomorrow? And I'll start with mine around GenAI, and it's really dedicated to everyone out there. Don't be afraid to try it out. Don't be afraid to leverage the latest technologies in order to help you in your day-to-day work. Whether we talk about notes summarization or code generation, don't be afraid to try it out and adopt the tools that fit you the best. However, always check it out before you share it to the world because it still might hallucinate, and that's normal. Maciek, your turn.
Well, I would say that if you are looking to enter that field and you are not my ML PhD or a coder person, but you are interested in how these models are being used, the whole user experience and UI design for the GenAI infused systems is super important. We lack professionals in that space. There is tons of work to be done. So it's a great entry point for people who are coming from less strictly technical backgrounds and want to play in that game. And there is a big open space there for you guys.
Thank you. And I think that has been it today around GenAI. Thank you, Maciek, for your time. This was Ubuntu AI, and your AI journey stops here for now. We'll meet in 2 weeks with a new episode. In the meantime, follow more articles from us and actually our external writers on Medium. See you soon.
Bye.